The message she couldn't explain. For 12 years, I believed my marriage to Rachel Bennett was unbreakable. Not perfect, not effortless, but strong. The kind of marriage built through thousands of ordinary days. Share breakfasts, late-night conversations, weekend errands, inside jokes nobody else understood. 12 years of choosing each other. At least that's what I thought. That evening started like every other Tuesday. I arrived home just after 6. Rachel was in the kitchen preparing dinner. "Hey," she said. "Hey." I kissed her cheek. She smiled. "How was work?" "Long." "Same." I laughed. "Anything exciting happen?" "Not really." The conversation felt normal, comfortable, familiar, exactly the way it had for years. We ate dinner together, talked about bills, discussed vacation plans, argued playfully about what movie to watch later. Nothing felt different. Nothing felt wrong. If someone had told me my life was about to change forever, I would have laughed. Around 8 o'clock, Rachel stood up from the couch. "I'm taking a shower." "Okay." She grabbed her phone and carried it upstairs. A minute later, she returned. "I forgot my charger." I pointed toward the kitchen counter. "Still there." "Thanks." She plugged her phone in beside the couch, then disappeared upstairs. I continued watching television, half paying attention, half scrolling through emails. Then Rachel's phone lit up. I didn't mean to look. The screen simply caught my eye. A message notification appeared. At first, I looked away. Then my eyes drifted back, and everything changed. The message preview showed only one sentence. "I miss talking to you at night." My stomach tightened instantly. I stared at the screen. The sender's name read, Evan. I didn't recognize it. Maybe a coworker. Maybe a friend. Maybe nothing. Yet something about the message felt wrong. Not explicit. Not inappropriate enough to prove anything. But intimate. Personal. The kind of message that didn't belong between strangers. I stared at it, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Trying to find another explanation. Maybe there was one. Maybe. The phone lit up again. A second message appeared. "I wish things were different." This time my blood ran cold. The room suddenly felt smaller, quieter, heavier. I stood up slowly. My heart pounded. For 12 years, I had never checked Rachel's phone. Never. Not once. I trusted her completely. But now that trust had a crack running through it. I picked up the phone. My hands felt strangely numb. The screen wasn't locked. Rachel never locked it around me. She never had a reason to. At least, I thought she didn't. I opened the conversation and immediately wished I hadn't. There were months of messages. Hundreds of them. Nothing graphic. Nothing obvious. Yet every line felt deeply personal. Inside jokes. Private conversations. Late-night chats. Emotional support. Daily updates. Small pieces of intimacy. The kind that should have belonged to a husband. Not another man. The bathroom water stopped upstairs. My chest tightened. I continued scrolling. Then I found a message from Rachel. "I wish I met you under different circumstances." My vision blurred. I read it again and again. The words didn't change. The meaning didn't change. The truth didn't change. Footsteps echoed upstairs. I placed the phone back exactly where it had been. Then I sat down. Rachel entered the room a minute later. She smiled. "What are we watching?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time all evening. And suddenly, I didn't recognize the woman standing in front of me. Who was Evan? The smile disappeared immediately. Her body froze. Only for a second. But I saw it. That moment told me everything. "Evan." "Yes." She swallowed. "A friend." "A friend." "Yes." I nodded slowly. Then asked the question that mattered. "Why does your friend miss talking to you at night?" Color drained from her face. "What?" I saw the messages. Silence. Complete silence. Rachel looked like someone caught standing on thin ice. "Daniel, don't." My voice came out calmer than I expected. "Just answer the question." She sat down slowly. "It's not what you think." I laughed. A short, humorless laugh. That's usually not a great sign. "Please." "Who is he?" "A colleague." "How long?" "What?" "How long have you been talking to him?" Rachel looked away. That hurt more than any answer. "How long?" "A few months." I nodded. "Try again." Her eyes filled with panic. "A year." The room felt like it tilted sideways. "A year." "Daniel." "A year." I didn't mean for it to happen. The word struck me immediately. because they sounded rehearsed, prepared, like she'd been expecting this conversation eventually. What exactly happened? Nothing. Rachel. Nothing physical. The specific wording made my stomach twist. I leaned forward. That's not what I asked. Tears began forming in her eyes. It wasn't supposed to become this. Become what? She couldn't answer, because any answer would reveal too much. The silence stretched painfully. Finally, I asked, "Do you love him?" Rachel immediately shook her head. "No." "Then why are you telling him things you should be telling me?" Her face crumpled. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." "No." "Yes." My voice rose for the first time. "You don't spend a year building a secret relationship by accident." "Daniel, please." "Why?" She wiped at her eyes. "I was lonely." The words hit hard. Not because loneliness wasn't real. Because she never told me. 12 years together. I stared at her. 12 years. "I know. You were lonely and never told me." "I didn't know how. So you told him instead?" She couldn't answer. Because the answer was yes. I stood up and walked toward the window. The darkness outside reflected my own expression back at me. Confused. Angry. Heartbroken. Behind me, Rachel began crying. "I'm sorry." I closed my eyes. "Sorry for what?" She didn't respond. Because there were too many possible answers. Sorry for the messages. Sorry for the lies. Sorry for getting caught. Sorry for all of it. I turned around. "What is this?" Rachel looked up at me. Tears streamed down her face. "I don't know." "Stop saying that." "I don't." "Yes, you do." My voice cracked. "Tell me the truth." She covered her face. For several seconds, the only sound in the room was her crying. Then she whispered the words that would haunt me for months. "It just happened." I stared at her. Disbelief flooded every part of me. "It just happened." She nodded weakly. "It just happened." I laughed again. This time, there was no humor at all. Only pain. "Rachel." My voice felt distant. Almost unfamiliar. "Affairs don't just happen." Fresh tears fell down her cheeks. I continued anyway. "They don't appear out of nowhere." She looked away. "They don't happen in a single moment." Silence. "They happen one choice at a time." I took a step forward. One conversation at a time. Another step. One secret at a time. Rachel sobbed quietly. One lie at a time. The room fell silent again. Neither of us moved. Neither of us knew what came next. 12 years of trust sat shattered between us. And as I looked at the woman I thought I knew better than anyone in the world, one terrifying realization settled into my heart. The marriage I believed was unbreakable had already started breaking long before I ever saw that message. The morning after discovering Rachel's messages, I didn't sleep. Not really. I spent the entire night sitting in the living room while she cried upstairs. Every hour felt longer than the last. Every memory felt poisoned. Around 6 in the morning, Rachel finally came downstairs. Her eyes were swollen. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Have you slept?" "No." "Daniel, don't." She stopped immediately. I stared at the coffee cup in my hands. "How long has it been physical?" Rachel lowered her head. The silence lasted several seconds. 3 months. My stomach twisted. 3 months. Yes. I laughed bitterly. 3 months of lies. Tears filled her eyes again. "I never wanted this." "Stop saying that." "What?" "I never wanted this." She flinched. "It's true." "No." I looked directly at her. "You wanted it every single time you chose it." "Daniel, you wanted it when you answered his messages." She looked away. "You wanted it when you met him." More silence. "You wanted it when you lied to me." Her shoulders trembled. "I made mistakes." I shook my head. "Mistakes are forgetting birthdays." The pain in my chest grew heavier. This was a decision. Rachel sat down across from me. It started emotionally. The words sounded ridiculous, as if that somehow made everything better. Emotionally? Yes. "Explain that to me." She wiped her eyes. "We talked." "You talked." At first, that was all. I nodded slowly. "And when did talking become cheating?" She couldn't answer. Because she knew the truth. It became cheating the moment she started hiding it. The moment she protected that relationship instead of our marriage. The moment secrecy became necessary. I stood up. "I need air." "Daniel, please." But I was already walking toward the door. An hour later, I sat across from my best friend, Mark Sullivan. He listened quietly while I explained everything. Every message, every lie, every excuse. When I finished, he leaned back heavily. Damn. Yeah. Are you okay? I laughed. Not remotely. Mark nodded. Fair. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he asked, what are you going to do? I don't know. Do you believe her? About which part? The emotional affair becoming physical later. I stare out the cafe window. Honestly, Mark waited. I don't know what I believe anymore. That was the worst part. Trust wasn't damaged. Trust was gone. Every memory now carried a question mark. Every explanation felt suspicious. Every moment from the past year demanded re-examination. Mark studied me carefully. You're going to start digging. It wasn't a question. No. Yes, you are. I sighed. Probably. Then prepare yourself. For what? You won't like what you find. Unfortunately, he was right. The deeper I looked, the worse everything became. That afternoon, I opened our shared calendar. At first, the entries seemed ordinary. Business dinners, work events, late meetings, client functions. But now I viewed them differently. I started comparing dates, cross-referencing messages, searching for patterns. And suddenly the past year looked completely different. One night stood out immediately. I'm sorry, Rachel had said. I have to stay late. I remembered that night clearly. I had eaten dinner alone, watched television alone, gone to bed alone. Now I checked the messages from that date. My blood ran cold. At exactly the same time she claimed to be working late, she had texted Derek. I can't wait to see you. I closed my eyes. The memory shattered instantly. That evening, Rachel approached me again. Can we talk? I didn't answer immediately. Finally, I nodded. Talk. She sat across from me. I know you're hurting. I laughed. You think? Please don't do that. Do what? Turn everything into anger. I stared at her. Rachel, I spent 12 years trusting you. Tears appeared again. I know. No. I shook my head. You don't. Silence. Then I asked the question that had haunted me all day. When was the first lie? Her expression changed immediately. What? The first lie. She swallowed. Daniel. No. I leaned forward. Not the biggest lie. Her eyes dropped. The first one. The room became painfully quiet. Finally, she whispered. About a year ago. The answer hit harder than expected. A year. An entire year. 12 months of deception. 12 months of pretending. 12 months of looking me in the eye and lying. I rubbed my face. Was there ever a moment when you planned to tell me? Rachel couldn't answer, because the answer was obvious. No. Over the next few days, Derek became impossible to ignore. His messages kept arriving. Calls, texts, voicemails. Rachel showed me some of them. He won't stop. I looked at the screen. Where are you? Please talk to me. I miss you. We need to figure this out. The words made me sick. Block him. I did. Then how is he contacting you? She looked away. Another answer. Another lie. Another secret. Rachel. I blocked one number. One. He has others. I laughed bitterly. Of course he did. Because this wasn't some accidental emotional connection. This was a relationship. A real relationship. One she had invested time and energy into. The realization hurt more every day. 3 days later, Mark called. You need to sit down. My stomach immediately tightened. Why? Because I found something. What? A long pause followed. Then he sighed. I talked to Kevin. Kevin worked with Rachel. What about him? He knew. The words hit like a punch. What? Not everything. My pulse raced. But enough. I gripped the phone tighter. Enough to what? Enough to suspect. The room suddenly felt smaller. Who else? Mark hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Mark. Another pause. Then quietly. Several people. I couldn't speak. Daniel. His voice softened. I'm sorry. Several people. Several people had known. Several people had watched me walk into rooms smiling. Talking about my marriage. Defending my wife. Trusting her completely. And all along they knew something I didn't. The humiliation was overwhelming. Who? Mark exhaled heavily. Co-workers. My chest tightened. Anyone else? Silence. Then, one of your neighbors. I closed my eyes. A neighbor. Someone living on my own street. Someone who probably saw things. Noticed things. Questioned things. while I remained completely blind. Why didn't anybody tell me? The question came out broken. Mark didn't answer immediately, because there was no good answer. Finally, he said, "People hate getting involved." I laughed bitterly. Apparently, after ending the call, I sat alone in the darkness. The affair itself was devastating, but this felt different, bigger, because now I understood something painful. The betrayal hadn't existed in isolation. It had existed in plain sight. People had seen it, suspected it, whispered about it, maybe even discussed it, while I continued believing my marriage was safe. I looked toward the stairs where Rachel sat quietly in our bedroom. For the first time, I realized the full scope of what had happened. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't something that simply happened. It was a carefully built secret life. And somehow, I had been the last person to find out. The day I left my marriage felt strangely quiet. No screaming, no broken dishes, no dramatic confrontation, just silence. After weeks of unanswered questions, sleepless nights, and painful discoveries, I finally understood something important. Nothing Rachel said could undo what she had done. Nothing Derek said mattered. Nothing I uncovered would change the truth. The marriage I thought I had was already gone. I was simply the last person to realize it. That morning, I carried a suitcase downstairs. Rachel looked up from the kitchen table. Her eyes immediately widened. "Daniel." I placed the suitcase near the front door. "What are you doing?" "Leaving." The color drained from her face. "What?" "I found an apartment." "Wait." She stood up so quickly that her chair nearly fell over. "You can't just leave." I stared at her. The irony almost made me laugh. "Really?" Tears instantly filled her eyes. "Please don't do this." "Rachel." My voice remained calm. "I can't stay here. We can fix this." "No." Her expression broke. "We can try. I've been trying." Silence. Painful silence. Finally, she whispered, "I love you." The words hurt more than if she had said nothing, because now they felt meaningless. "Maybe." Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. "What does that mean?" "It means love without loyalty doesn't mean much." She covered her mouth. I picked up my suitcase. "Daniel, please." I stopped at the door. For 12 years, that house had been home. Now it felt like a place where a stranger happened to live. "I hope you figure out what you really want." Then I walked away. The apartment wasn't impressive. One bedroom, small kitchen, old furniture, thin walls. But it was mine. Nobody lied to me there. Nobody betrayed me there. Nobody made me question my own reality there. The first night felt lonely. The second felt strange. By the third week, it started feeling peaceful. Mark visited often. One evening, he looked around the apartment and laughed. "You look better." "Do I?" "Absolutely." I sat down on the couch. "I still feel terrible." "That's normal." "Then why do I look better?" Mark grinned. "Because you're finally sleeping." I laughed. "Fair." He handed me a drink. "Any contact from Rachel?" "Too much." "How bad?" I pulled out my phone. 32 missed calls. Dozens of messages. Several voicemails. Mark whistled. "Wow. Yeah." "Have you answered?" "No." "Good." I looked down at the screen. For years, Rachel had been the center of my world. Now, every message felt like a reminder of a life I no longer wanted. As the weeks passed, I started rebuilding pieces of myself. Things I had forgotten. Things I had abandoned. Things I never made time for. I joined a local cycling group. Started reading again. Returned to photography. Spent weekends hiking. Simple things. Normal things. Yet every activity reminded me how much of myself I had lost during the marriage. One afternoon, Mark and I sat beside a lake after a long bike ride. "You smile more now." I shook my head. "That's impossible." "No." He laughed. "It isn't." I stared at the water. "Sometimes I feel guilty." "Why?" "Because I'm supposed to be devastated." Mark looked at me. "Who says?" "My marriage ended." "Your marriage ended months ago." The statement caught me off guard. Then I realized he was right. The relationship hadn't ended when I moved out. It ended when Rachel started building a secret life with someone else. Everything afterward was simply the aftermath. Meanwhile, Rachel's fantasy began collapsing. At first, Derek seemed supportive, at least according to the messages she kept sending me. "We can finally be together. I know who I want. Please talk to me." Then the tone started changing. A month later, her messages looked different. Things aren't what I expected. Can we please talk? I made mistakes. I ignored them. Then one evening, Mark called. You hear about Derek? No. He's already backing away. I laughed bitterly. Shocking. Apparently, Rachel wants a real relationship. And Mark snorted. Apparently, Derek doesn't. The irony was brutal. For a year, Rachel had built a fantasy around him. A secret world. A hidden connection. Now reality had arrived. And reality wasn't nearly as romantic. A few weeks later, Rachel showed up unexpectedly. I was carrying groceries into my apartment building when I saw her standing beside my car. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked exhausted, paler, thinner. Her eyes were red from crying. Daniel, I froze. What are you doing here? I needed to see you. I sighed heavily. Rachel, please. The desperation in her voice was impossible to miss. I unlocked my apartment door. 5 minutes. She followed me inside. The moment she entered, she looked around slowly. The photographs, the books, the bike equipment, the camera gear, evidence of a life continuing without her. Something about that seemed to affect her deeply. You've changed. I set the groceries on the counter. People do that. Tears appeared immediately. Derek left. I wasn't surprised. Not even slightly. What happened? Her laugh sounded broken. The moment things became complicated, he disappeared. I nodded. Silence filled the room. Then she whispered, I destroyed everything for nothing. I looked at her. For the first time, I saw genuine regret. Not regret about being caught. Regret about the choices themselves. The difference mattered. Unfortunately, it didn't change anything. Daniel. What? She wiped her eyes. I was wrong. I remained silent. I know that doesn't fix anything. No, it doesn't. She nodded weakly. Then she took a step closer. I miss you. The words hung in the air. Months ago, hearing them would have shattered me. Now they felt distant, like echoes from another life. I know. I miss us. I looked around the apartment, at the life I was rebuilding, at the peace I was slowly finding. Then I looked back at her. The problem is that I don't miss who I became. Her face crumpled. What? I spent years ignoring myself. The truth came easier than expected. I spent years putting you first. Tears streamed down her cheeks. And now, I thought carefully before answering. Now I'm learning how to put myself first. Rachel broke completely. She sat down and buried her face in her hands. For several minutes, she cried. I felt sad for her, genuinely sad. But sadness wasn't the same as love. And sympathy wasn't the same as trust. Eventually, she stood. I understand. I wasn't sure she did, but I appreciated the effort. When she reached the door, she stopped. Is there any chance? The question lingered between us. I looked at her, really looked at her, then answered honestly. I don't know. Rachel nodded slowly. The uncertainty hurt her. I could see it, but it was the only truthful answer I had. She left a few moments later, and as the door closed behind her, I realized something important. For the first time since discovering the affair, I wasn't waiting for Rachel anymore. I was finally moving forward. 3 months after moving out, my life looked completely different. Not perfect, not healed, but different. For the first time since discovering the affair, I woke up without immediately thinking about Rachel. Some mornings still hurt. Some nights still felt lonely. But the crushing weight that once followed me everywhere had started fading. One Tuesday afternoon, I sat across from Olivia Carter at a downtown cafe. She had been a professional contact for years. Smart, direct, the kind of person who never wasted words. She slid a folder across the table. I have a proposal. I looked down at it. What kind of proposal? A business partnership. That got my attention. Why me? Olivia laughed softly. Because you're good at what you do. Lots of people are good. Yes. She nodded. But lots of people aren't trustworthy. The word hit harder than she realized. Trustworthy. Once, I would have taken that compliment for granted. Now it meant everything. I opened the folder. The opportunity was substantial. Better income. More flexibility. A chance to build something meaningful. When I looked up, Olivia was smiling. You interested? For the first time in months, genuine excitement stirred inside me. Very. Good. She extended her hand. Then let's build something. I shook it, and for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about the future. Meanwhile, Rachel's world continued shrinking. The truth about the affair had spread, not through gossip, through consequences. Family members learned what happened. Friends asked difficult questions. Relationships changed. One evening, Rachel called. Surprisingly, I answered. Hello. Her voice sounded tired. Hi. What's wrong? A bitter laugh escaped her. Everything. I remained silent. She continued anyway. My sister won't speak to me. I closed my eyes. Rachel. No. Her voice cracked. I'm not asking for sympathy. Then what are you asking for? I don't know. The honesty surprised me. For months, she had searched for explanations. Excuses. Reasons. Now she sounded exhausted. Like someone finally running out of places to hide. People found out. I figured. They look at me differently. I stared out the window. Because they know what happened. Silence followed. Then quietly. I deserve it. The words caught me off guard. Because for the first time, she wasn't defending herself. She wasn't blaming loneliness. She wasn't blaming circumstances. She wasn't blaming me. She was accepting reality. And that mattered. Even if it came too late. A few weeks later, Mark called. You sitting down? Should I be? Probably. I laughed. What's going on? Derek's in trouble. That immediately got my attention. What kind of trouble? Workplace investigation. I frowned. What? Mark exhaled heavily. Turns out Rachel wasn't the only one. The room suddenly felt very quiet. What? Several complaints. I stared at the wall. Several. Yeah. The disgust in Mark's voice was obvious. Apparently, he had a habit of getting involved with coworkers. My stomach turned. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Not because I felt sorry for Derek. Because I suddenly understood something Rachel hadn't. She was never special to him. She was just another chapter. Another secret. Another temporary distraction. What happens now? Mark laughed bitterly. His career is basically over. The news spread quickly. Within days, details emerged. Ethics violations. Improper workplace relationships. Questionable conduct. Professional boundaries ignored. The company launched a formal investigation. Clients started leaving. Partnerships disappeared. Everything Derek spent years building began collapsing. One evening, Rachel showed up at my apartment again. This time she looked completely defeated. I opened the door. Rachel, can we talk? I hesitated, then stepped aside. Okay. She entered slowly. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, she looked at me. I found out about the investigation. I nodded. So did I. Tears immediately filled her eyes. He did this before. The pain in her voice was unmistakable. I sat down across from her. Yes, I wasn't different. No, she wasn't. But I didn't say it. Rachel already knew. He said things that made me feel important. I remained silent. He made me feel understood. The tears started falling. And I believed him. I watched her struggle through the realization. The fantasy she built had finally collided with reality. What hurts the most? The question escaped before I could stop it. Rachel laughed bitterly. The truth. I waited. The truth is that I risked everything for someone who didn't value me. Her voice broke completely, and I betrayed someone who did. The room fell silent, because there was nothing left to argue about. No excuses remained. No justification survived. Only consequences. Over the following month, Rachel continued trying to rebuild her life. Not our marriage. Her life. The difference mattered. She started therapy, repaired relationships where she could, accepted responsibility where she couldn't. Slowly, she stopped talking about mistakes and started talking about choices. One evening, we met at a park. She sat beside me on a bench. I used to say the affair just happened. I looked at her. Yes, I was lying. The admission came without hesitation, without fear, without defense. I know. She nodded. I wanted to avoid responsibility. The honesty was painful, but necessary. It didn't just happen. No. She wiped her eyes. I chose it. The words hung in the air. Simple, brutal, true. I chose every conversation. I said nothing. I chose every lie. Silence. I chose every secret. She stared at the ground. and every choice moved me farther away from you. For the first time, I believe she truly understood. Not the damage. That was impossible. But the cause, the ownership, the responsibility. And that mattered more than excuses ever could. Later that evening, Olivia called. Good news. I could use some. She laughed. The partnership is officially approved. I smiled. Seriously? Seriously? The excitement in her voice matched my own. When do we start? Immediately. After ending the call, I sat alone in my apartment. For a long time, I simply stared out the window. My life wasn't where I expected it to be. My marriage had collapsed. My trust had been shattered. My future had changed completely. Yet somehow, hope remained. Real hope. Not hope that Rachel would change. Not hope that the past could be erased. Hope for myself. Hope for what came next. Meanwhile, Derek's carefully constructed image continued falling apart. Rachel continued facing the consequences of her choices. And I continued moving forward. One step at a time. Because sometimes the cost of betrayal isn't losing the person you chased. Sometimes the cost is losing the person who truly loved you. And by the time Rachel fully understood that truth, the life we once shared had already become a memory she could never get back. 8 months after I walked out of my marriage, Rachel called and left a voicemail. Not 10 voicemails. Not 20 messages. Just one. Daniel, I'd like to see you one last time. No pressure. No expectations. Just one conversation. If you're willing. I listened to it twice. Then a third time. For several days, I ignored it. Not because I was angry. Because I was finally at peace. And peace makes you careful about what you allow back into your life. A week later, I sent a single text. Where? Her response came quickly. The Lakeside Restaurant. I stared at the message. The same place where we celebrated our 10th anniversary. The same place where we once talked about growing old together. Life had a strange sense of humor. The following Friday, I arrived 10 minutes early. The restaurant looked exactly the same. The lake shimmered behind the windows. Soft music played through hidden speakers. Couples sat at nearby tables. For a moment, old memories returned. Not painful ones, just memories. Rachel arrived a few minutes later. She looked nervous. Not dramatic, not emotional. Just nervous. Hi. Hi. She sat across from me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled sadly. You look good. I laughed softly. People keep saying that. Maybe because it's true. I studied her face. She looked healthier than the last time I saw her. Still sad. Still carrying regret. But stronger. In a different way. The waitress took our orders and disappeared. Rachel folded her hands together. Thank you for coming. You said this was important. It is. I nodded. Then talk. She took a deep breath. For months, I had heard different versions of the story. Different explanations. Different attempts to understand what happened. This time felt different. More honest. More final. I spent a long time telling myself the affair wasn't my fault. I remained silent. She continued. I blamed loneliness. A pause. I blamed stress. Another pause. I blamed circumstances. I watched her carefully. Then she looked directly at me. And I blamed you. The honesty surprised me. Not because it wasn't true. Because she finally admitted it. I know. She nodded slowly. I know you do. The waitress arrived with drinks. Neither of us touched them. Rachel's eyes never left mine. None of those things caused the affair. No. They were excuses. Yes. A tear formed in her eye. This time she didn't wipe it away. I spent months trying to avoid the truth. The room felt unusually quiet. Then she finally said the words I had waited almost a year to hear. The affair didn't just happen. My chest tightened slightly. Not from pain. From closure. Real closure. Rachel continued speaking. It happened because I allowed it. I remained silent. It happened because I liked the attention. Another tear fell. It happened because I enjoyed feeling wanted. More silence. It happened because I made selfish choices over and over again. The words landed heavily. Because they were true. Simple. Direct. Honest. No excuses. No blame. No hiding. Just truth. And somehow, hearing the truth mattered more than any apology ever could. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then Rachel laughed bitterly. You know what the worst part is? What? I knew it was wrong. I looked at her. From the beginning? Yes. The answer came immediately, without hesitation. I knew the first time I hit a conversation. Silence. I knew the first time I deleted a message. Silence. I knew the first time I lied to you. Her voice cracked. I knew every step. The admission hurt, even now, but pain and truth often arrive together. I spent months pretending I was confused. She shook her head. I wasn't confused. The tears finally came freely. I was selfish. For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not sadness, relief. Because the mystery was gone. The questions were gone. The excuses were gone. What remained was reality. In reality, even when painful, is easier to carry than uncertainty. Rachel looked down at the table. I don't expect forgiveness. I leaned back in my chair. Good. A sad smile appeared. Fair. I mean that. I know. She nodded. You don't owe me anything. The conversation felt different from all the others. No manipulation. No hidden agenda. Just honesty. The kind we should have had from the beginning. Do you regret it? The question left my mouth before I could stop it. Rachel closed her eyes. Every day, I believed her. Not because she sounded convincing. Because regret had changed her. I could see it. The woman sitting across from me wasn't the same woman who said, "It just happened." Life had forced her to confront herself. And that confrontation had left scars. Eventually, she looked up. I need to ask one thing. Okay, is there any chance for us? The question finally arrived. I knew it would. The answer had lived in my mind for months. Not because I hated her. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I had spent nearly a year rebuilding a life that belonged to me. A life built on peace, trust, self-respect. I thought about my new business partnership, the friends who stood beside me, the hobbies I rediscovered, the mornings that no longer started with anxiety, the nights that no longer ended with suspicion. Most importantly, I thought about the man I had become. Then I answered honestly. There was a time when I would have done anything to save our marriage. Rachel lowered her eyes. I know, but that version of me doesn't exist anymore. Fresh tears appeared. Yet she didn't interrupt, didn't argue, didn't beg. She simply listened. I don't hate you. Her shoulders trembled. I know. I forgive you. That finally broke her composure. A sob escaped before she covered her mouth. But forgiveness doesn't mean rebuilding. The truth settled between us. Painful, final, necessary. Rachel cried quietly. Not because she disagreed. Because she understood. At last, she truly understood. We sat together for another hour. Talking, remembering, saying goodbye to a chapter that had defined so much of our lives. When the conversation finally ended, we walked outside. The lake reflected the evening sun. Everything looked peaceful. Rachel stopped near the parking lot. This is it, isn't it? I smiled sadly. Yes. She nodded, then surprised me. Good. I raised an eyebrow. Good. You deserve peace. The words carried no bitterness, no resentment, only acceptance. And perhaps that was the final sign that she had changed. Not enough to undo the past, but enough to face it honestly. Take care of yourself, Daniel. You too. For a moment, we simply stood there. Then she walked toward her car. I watched her leave. Not with anger, not with heartbreak, just acceptance. When she disappeared from view, I turned and walked in the opposite direction. Forward, toward a future that no longer belonged to betrayal. Toward a life I had rebuilt with my own hands. Toward peace. As I walked beside the lake, I thought about the words that started everything. It just happened. No, affairs don't just happen. They're built one choice at a time, one lie at a time, one secret at a time. And healing happens the same way. One day at a time, one step at a time, one honest decision at a time. This time I chose myself. And for the first time in a very long while, I knew I was exactly where I needed to be.